The night screamed her name, not in praise, not in mercy, but in hunger. Wind tore through the ancient market like a living thing, ripping down banners soaked in rain and blood. The crimson cloth snapped in the storm, carrying the mark of the council. 2 wolves devouring each other, fangs locked forever in judgment. And beneath that bleeding sky, she ran. Lyra's heart pounded so loud it drowned the thunder. Chains still clung to her wrists, each step dragging their weight through mud that reeked of fear and iron. The square that once smelled of roasted grain and spiced oil was now a graveyard of cages and screams. Torches hissed as rain met fire, casting her face in flashes of gold and shadow. They were hunting her, and every soul in the marketplace knew it. The crowd had scattered when the first alarm bell rang, but some lingered in doorways, watching, whispering, daring each other to look. They knew what she was. They'd seen her fight in the council pits, seen her bleed silver, seen the flame that burned inside her skin. The slave with no pack. The she-wolf born under the wrong moon, the cursed one. She stumbled on the slick stone, catching herself on a toppled fruit cart. Apples rolled into the dark, splitting open underfoot like small red hearts. Her breath came in broken gasps. Every inhale burned. Every exhale carried a memory she didn't want. Iron cuffs, the crack of a whip, the way the crowd had roared when she shifted for their amusement. Now those same voices rose again, echoing from the alleys. There, the traitor. The naked she-wolf. Seize her before she calls the fire. Lyra forced herself forward. The storm plastered her hair against her face. Strands of silver black clung to her lips. She tore them away with shaking fingers and looked up. The moon flickered behind the clouds like a dying god, giving her just enough light to see the end of the street, stone arches leading to the old slave market. If she could reach the tunnels beneath it, she might live until dawn. But the council's soldiers were closing in. She could hear the rhythm of their boots, the metallic promise of chains. Her pulse answered with defiance. She sprinted toward the arches, splashing through puddles thick as blood. Every muscle screamed, but fear kept her moving. Behind her, the bells changed pitch, 1, then 2, then a third. The full alarm. The sound meant only one thing: a fugitive with forbidden power. Lightning split the sky, turning the world white for a heartbeat. In that flash, she saw them. 6 soldiers in silver armor, eyes glinting through their helmets. The front one carried a net of iron threads that shimmered with enchantment. "Lyra of no pack," he shouted. "By decree of the council, surrender yourself for judgment." Judgment. She almost laughed, but it came out a broken whisper. Judgment had been following her since birth. She ducked into the shadow of the archway and pressed her back against the cold wall. Water ran down the stones like tears. She could taste metal on her tongue, blood, rain, and the memory of fear. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. "If I shift, they'll kill me," she murmured to herself. "If I don't, I die slower." Her body ached to change, to call the wolf that lived beneath her skin. But the council's chains still burned from the last time. She could feel the silver embedded in her flesh, tiny shards that punished her whenever she tried. She needed another way. The soldiers' voices grew louder. Torches threw long shadows across the walls. She could hear the clatter of armor, the hiss of silver against leather. She pressed herself deeper into the darkness, heart pounding like a drum. A dog barked. Someone shouted. The sound bounced through the archway. She moved, quick, silent, bare feet over cold stone. She slipped through a gap between two stalls, into the ruins beyond the market. Broken cages lay scattered, their iron bars twisted. The stench of wet fur clung to everything. She crouched behind a toppled statue, once a proud wolf carved from marble, now headless, its eyes eaten away by time. From here, she could see the whole square. The soldiers fanned out. One knelt to touch the ground where she'd slipped. Another sniffed the air. "Her scent ends here," one muttered. "Check the cages," said the leader. "She won't get far. The chains slow her." Lyra's hands clenched. Her nails bit into her palms until she felt the warm sting of blood. She wanted to run again, but her legs trembled. She'd been running her whole life. From the council, from her past, from herself. Now the storm itself seemed to whisper, "Enough." She took a slow breath. The air was cold, alive. The faintest pulse of heat flickered beneath her ribs. A small, rebellious spark that had never gone out. The forbidden flame. Her curse. Her secret. She pressed her palms against the ground, closing her eyes. The stone felt ancient, carved long before the council rose to power. Somewhere deep within it, she felt a heartbeat. Not her own. Something older. "Guide me," she whispered. "Just this once." The spark answered. A faint shimmer spread from her hands, so subtle it could have been lightning reflected in the puddles. The scent of smoke curled through the air. The soldiers froze, heads snapping toward the ruins. "Do you smell that?" one asked. "Fire," said another. Lyra didn't wait. She darted from her hiding place, slipping between the shadows. Her body moved on instinct, quick, fluid, silent. She reached the edge of the ruins and ducked behind a pillar. The rain masked her scent for now, but it wouldn't last. The sound of boots drew closer. She looked down at the chains on her wrists. The metal glowed faintly blue under the stormlight, etched with the council's runes. No ordinary fire could melt them. But her fire wasn't ordinary. She focused on the heat in her chest, on the pulse that had haunted her since childhood. Her breath trembled as she whispered to it. Just enough to break. The flame inside her answered with a slow, painful bloom. Her skin flushed, steam rising from her arms. The runes hissed. The air filled with the smell of burning metal. Pain ripped through her, but the chains softened. She bit her lip to keep from screaming. Her vision blurred. The last link snapped with a sound like thunder. Freedom burned. She stumbled forward, dizzy, and the flame retreated back into her chest as the rain cooled her skin. Her wrists were raw and bleeding, but unbound. Then came the shout. "There! By the shrine!" Torches flared. Figures moved through the rain, closer now, faster. She turned and ran, past the ruins, through the half-collapsed archway, down the narrow steps into the old tunnels beneath the market. The air grew heavy, thick with moisture and dust. Her bare feet slapped against the stone. The walls closed in, slick with moss. Somewhere above, the bells still rang. She reached a junction lit by a single candle stub. Water dripped from the ceiling, hitting the flame with soft hisses. She paused, listening. Nothing but her heartbeat. Then a whisper. "Lyra." She froze. The voice was low, rough, carrying a note of something she couldn't name. Not threat, not comfort. Both. She turned slowly. At the far end of the tunnel, half hidden by shadow, stood a man. He wore no armor, just a cloak dark enough to swallow the light. The hood was drawn low. But when he lifted his head, his eyes caught the candle's glow. Gold, bright as molten metal. She knew those eyes. Kael Varin. The notorious Alpha, the Council's enforcer, the wolf who'd watched her fight in the pits and never looked away. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice raw. He stepped closer, slow, measured, like a predator closing on wounded prey. "To keep you alive," he said. She laughed once, bitter. "You? The Council's favourite executioner? Not tonight." His gaze swept over her, lingering on the broken chains, the blood. "They'll be here soon. You need to move." "Why should I trust you?" "Because the only other option is dying in their hands." Lightning cracked above them, and for a heartbeat she saw his face fully, the scar along his jaw, the shadow under his eyes, the rain dripping from his hair. There was something different in him now, not pity, not duty, something rawer. She wanted to ask why he cared. She wanted to hate him. But the exhaustion in her bones left no room for questions. He reached out, palm open. "Come with me." Her pulse quickened. She looked at his hand, at the calluses, the faint shimmer of power beneath his skin. Every instinct screamed to run. Yet another part of her, the part that had been alone for too long, whispered to take it. Thunder rolled overhead. She hesitated. Then she stepped forward. When her fingers brushed his, warmth surged through her, wild, electric, familiar in a way that scared her. He pulled her close, his voice low. "You have no idea what you've started." "Then tell me." He didn't. He just turned toward the tunnel's end. "This way." They moved together through the darkness. The storm's roar fading behind them. For the first time in years, she wasn't running alone, but the fire inside her was awake now, and the Council would never stop hunting flame. The rain had not stopped since the market burned. It followed them into the wilderness like a curse, whispering through the hollow bones of the forest, soaking their skin until the scent of ash and blood was all that clung to them. The earth beneath Lyra's feet was slick, uneven, and cold, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Kyle stumbled beside her, his breath ragged, his once proud stride now broken by the gash that split across his ribs. Every drop of rain carried the echo of pursuit. The Council's hounds howled somewhere beyond the ridge, their howls rolling through the hills like thunder. Lyra's heart pounded in her throat. The chains had left scars on her wrists, raw and burning, but it was the look in Cale's eyes, that strange mixture of defiance and pain, that haunted her most. He hadn't spoken since they fled the marketplace, not when the guards fell, not when the flames devoured the gallows, not when she pulled him away from death's shadow. Now his silence was heavy, as though every word he could have said might betray them both. The trees ahead thickened, forming a canopy that swallowed the moonlight whole. The world turned darker, quieter, until the only sound left was the uneven rhythm of their breathing. Lyra's pulse began to slow, but fear still clawed at her chest. "Here," she whispered, stopping near a crumbling arch carved into a hill. Moss had devoured it, and ancient stone faces stared down at her from its edges, faces worn smooth by centuries, but their agony still lingered. "We can hide here." Kyle didn't answer. His legs buckled beneath him, and before she could reach out, he collapsed against the cold ground. Lyra dropped beside him, hands trembling as she brushed mud from his jaw. His skin burned with fever, his pulse faint beneath her fingertips. She could smell the poison in his blood. The silver-tipped spear had done its work. "No, no, no." Her voice cracked as she pressed her palm over the wound. "Not like this." Cale's eyelids fluttered open, the faint glow of his wolf struggling behind them. Don't Touch it, he rasped. The council's mark. Spreads if you— I don't care, she hissed. You saved me. You dragged me out of that pit. Let me save you. He tried to move, but she pinned him with a strength that wasn't entirely human. Inside her, something ancient stirred. The forbidden flame that had burned in her blood since birth. It whispered against her ribs, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The same flame that had once brought her village to its knees. Her mother's voice echoed from memory. Never use it. Never. Unless it's the end. But what if this was the end? Cale's breathing faltered. His head rolled to the side, eyes clouding. The moon shifted through the clouds, pale and watchful, painting the ruin of the amphitheatre in ghostly light. The seats that once held crowds now lay broken, vines creeping through cracked stone. The air was heavy with the scent of wet iron. Blood, rust, and history mingling into one. Lyra's hands hovered above his chest. The flame responded to her fear, crawling up her arms like liquid light. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please don't leave me. For a moment, the world went still. Then, a pulse. The ground beneath them vibrated softly, as though the ruins themselves were holding their breath. The fire spilled from her palms, white and silver, sinking into his flesh with a hiss that sounded like wind through bone. Kyle's body arched. His eyes snapped open, not golden, not wolf, but blazing white. The mark of the council burned away from his skin, leaving behind smooth flesh and a thin scar that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lyra gasped, her vision swimming. The power didn't just leave her hands. It drained her veins, her breath, her thoughts. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Cale's hand reaching toward her, trembling. When she woke, the rain had stopped. The sky was painted in bruised twilight, the kind that blurs time itself. Not dawn, not dusk, but something lost in between. Cale sat by the entrance, his shirt torn open, the wound now closed. He was alive, but the way he looked at her, that was what froze her blood. His gaze wasn't soft or grateful. It was wild, conflicted, as if he had just witnessed something sacred and dangerous in the same breath. What did you do? He asked quietly. Lyra swallowed hard. I healed you. No. His voice deepened, like distant thunder. You didn't just heal me. I felt it. Every wolf in 100 miles probably felt it. You burned through the veil, Lyra. The council will know. She looked down at her palms. The glow was gone, replaced by dark veins that shimmered faintly beneath her skin. The mark of the she-flame, the same curse the council had sworn to extinguish generations ago. They already knew, she murmured. That's why they branded me. Kyle's jaw tightened. You should have let me die. Her heart twisted. You don't mean that. I do. He stood, towering above her, his shadow merging with the ruins. Now they'll come for both of us. You've tied my blood to yours. The council will call it a pact of flame, and that's punishable by burning. She rose too, defiance sparking in her eyes. Then let them come. He turned away, fists clenching. You don't understand what they're capable of. I do, she said softly. I've lived it. I was 7 when they burned my mother. She begged for mercy. They called her a witch because her tears sparked light. They said she carried the flame too. I swore I'd never use it. But you— Her voice broke. You were dying. Kyle's breath hitched, the anger in him faltering just long enough for something else to flicker through. Something human. He stepped closer, the tension between them pulling tight like a bowstring. You risked everything. I had nothing left to lose. Silence hung heavy, thick with things neither dared to say. The air crackled faintly, their heartbeats sinking in the quiet ruin. His scent, rain, smoke, and iron surrounded her. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of wanting something she didn't understand. Cale's hand brushed against her wrist, almost by accident. The contact sent a jolt of heat through her. He froze, eyes searching hers as though he'd felt it too. "Lyra," he murmured. The word wasn't a warning. It was a prayer. She pulled back, breaking the spell. "We should rest. They'll be searching by dawn." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on her, heavy and unreadable. He moved toward the edge of the ruin, scanning the horizon. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds again, but something brighter glowed faintly in the distance. Torchlight, far down the valley. They were coming. By morning, the decree had already spread across the realm. Whispers carried it from pack to pack, from outpost to outpost. Any wolf who harbours the she-flame shall burn with her. The words struck like poison, seeping into every den and every heart. Lyra could feel it in the air. The shift, the fear. The bond between her and Cale was no longer a secret. It pulsed inside her, faint but alive, connecting them in ways that defied both law and reason. That night, when sleep finally came, it wasn't peaceful. She dreamed of a woman standing at the edge of an ancient battlefield, the first wolf queen. Her silver hair whipped through the wind, her wrists bound by gold chains. A crowd roared for her death. She turned her eyes toward the sky, tears glowing like molten stars, and when she spoke, the world trembled. Love is not a crime, but those who fear it will make it one. Lyra reached for her, but the vision shattered. Fire and blood replaced the dream, and through it she saw herself, chained to the same pillar, marked with the same sigil. Her eyes snapped open. Kyle was already awake, sitting near the broken altar, sharpening a blade with steady precision. His expression was distant, carved in stone. "You were dreaming," he said quietly. "I saw her," Lyra replied. "The first queen." He paused mid-motion. "That's not possible. The flame doesn't show visions unless it's trying to warn you." "She said something," Lyra whispered, her throat tight. "About love being a crime." Kyle exhaled sharply. "It is, at least between us." Her chest ached. "You don't believe that." "I have to," he said, voice low. "Because if I don't, I'll choose you, and choosing you means death for us both." The confession hit her harder than any blade could. It wasn't rejection, it was restraint, the kind born of fear, not apathy. She wanted to scream, to tell him that she didn't care about laws or flames or bloodlines, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned away, clutching her arms around herself, as if she could trap the warmth that was fading from her skin. Outside, dawn bled slowly into the sky. The first light touched the amphitheater's stones, making the moss shimmer like emerald fire. Somewhere in the valley, a horn sounded, the council's hunters announcing their trail. Cale rose, blade in hand. "They've found us." Lyra stood too, fire flickering faintly beneath her skin. "Then they'll learn what it means to hunt a flame." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since their escape, there was something close to awe in his eyes. "You're not afraid?" She smiled, faint and fierce. "I was born afraid. I just learned to burn through it." The ground trembled beneath their feet. Wolves howled in unison, the sound echoing through the ruins like 1,000 ghosts. Kale moved in front of her, his stance defensive. But Lyra stepped forward, her palms igniting with a dim, silver light. The first shadow crossed the threshold of the amphitheatre, a figure clad in armour, bearing the crest of the council, his eyes locked on hers, filled with hatred. "By decree of the High Moon Council," he bellowed, "you are hereby sentenced." The rest was lost to the roar of fire. Lyra's hands exploded with light, the air trembling as heat surged through the stone walls. Kale shielded his eyes as the blaze swallowed their enemies whole, leaving nothing but ash and the faint scent of burnt metal. When it was over, Lyra's knees gave out. Kyle caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her trembling body. "Don't ever do that again," he murmured against her hair. She looked up at him, eyes glowing faintly. "Then don't ever make me watch you bleed again." For a moment, neither moved. The world around them was silent. No rain, no wind, no pursuit. Just them, suspended in the fragile calm between chaos and desire. Kale's breath brushed her cheek. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't even know what you've done." Lyra's lips parted. "Then tell me." He hesitated, eyes burning into hers. "The prophecy. It speaks of one who mates under the full eclipse, the union of fire and shadow. It says she will shatter the blood oath, the same oath that binds every alpha to the council." Lyra's pulse quickened. "And you think that's me?" "I know it is." "Then maybe," she said softly, "it's time the oath was broken." Kale's hand lingered at her jaw, his thumb brushing her skin. The tension between them shifted, no longer born of fear, but of something far more dangerous. Longing. Outside, the clouds began to thin. The faint curve of the moon appeared again, glowing silver against the dark. It wasn't full yet, but it was close. And as the first rays of dawn touched the ruins, Lyra whispered to the wind, a promise that would soon ignite an empire. "If the law demands I burn, then let the whole world burn with me." The dawn bled red across the ridges. Smoke from the burned soldiers rose in thin, dark ribbons that twisted toward the clouds like unholy prayers. Kale and Lyra didn't speak as they crossed the valley. The silence between them was a living thing, stretching, breathing, heavy with everything unsaid. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, the forest quieter than it should be, as though the world already knew what was coming. The ground beneath them steamed faintly where Lyra stepped. The rain had ceased, yet droplets hissed and vanished the moment they touched her skin. Tiny embers flickered in her footprints, blooming briefly before fading into the damp soil. Kyle noticed. He always noticed. "Stop," he said quietly. Lyra froze. Her hair clung to her neck, wet and wild. "What is it?" He gestured to the glowing marks she left behind. "You're burning the earth." She looked down, the faint orange light reflecting in her eyes. "It's not fire," she whispered. "It's awakening. The land reacts to the flame." Kale's expression darkened. "The land reacts to power, and power always draws blood." A shiver of wind passed through the trees, carrying a faint sound. The distant rhythm of hooves, the thrum of armor, the low growl of wolves running in formation. Kale's jaw clenched. "They're close." "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower, colder. "My brother." Lyra's pulse quickened. She'd heard stories, every wolf had. Darius, alpha of the old order, the council's enforcer, a wolf born without mercy and raised without weakness. Cale's shoulders tensed as he listened. He won't stop until he finds us. Will he kill you too? He met her eyes. If it proves his loyalty. A silence fell between them, heavy as stone. Lyra's heart twisted. She wanted to reach for him, to tell him that love didn't have to be war, that not every bond had to end in blood. But the look in Cale's eyes stopped her. It wasn't fear she saw there. It was resignation. By the time the sun climbed above the trees, the forest had turned to stone. The last of the wild green gave way to barren cliffs and cracked soil. In the distance, faint structures rose, remnants of an old amphitheatre's twin. Another ruin of the empire that came before the wolves, and at its centre, a pyre burned. They could see the flames even from the ridge. Cale's stomach turned. The council was already here. Lyra's breath came shallow. They know. He nodded once. They always know. They crept closer, the heat of the pyre rising like a wall. The scent of burning resin filled the air. Below, armoured wolves gathered in disciplined lines. And standing before the fire, tall, silver-haired, eyes sharp as blades, was Darius, Cale's brother. The resemblance was uncanny, but where Cale carried storms in his expression, Darius bore the calm precision of a blade. Every movement was controlled, every glance deliberate. And when he turned toward the ridge, his gaze found Cale instantly, as if he'd known where to look all along. Kyle cursed under his breath. Too late. Lyra's hand brushed his arm. We can still run. They'll scent us before the first step. Then fight. He looked at her. There's no victory here. Something inside her snapped at his tone, that quiet acceptance of fate. You think I ran this far to die quietly? She said, voice trembling with fury. I burned for you. I broke every law they made for me. If we die, it won't be on our knees. Before Cale could stop her, she stepped from the shadows, descending the slope into the open valley. The sun caught the edges of her hair, igniting it like molten metal. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The soldiers froze. Every eye turned toward her. Lyra! Cale's voice was sharp, but it was already too late. Darius raised a hand. Hold. The soldiers halted, their weapons glinting. He took a few steps forward, studying her with quiet calculation. The she-flame, he said at last. You're smaller than I expected. Lyra didn't answer. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, but she didn't flinch. Darius tilted his head. And beautiful. I can see why my brother broke the law for you. Cale's growl tore through the air as he leapt down after her, landing hard enough to crack stone. His eyes blazed gold. Stay away from her. Darius smiled faintly. You should have stayed away from her, brother. The council gave you your command, your lands, your pack. You had everything. But then she looked at you, and you forgot what you were. Cale's hands curled into fists. And what am I? A weapon, Darius said simply. Like me. The tension between them thrummed like a live wire. Two alphas, same blood, opposite hearts. Lyra could feel it. The pull of destiny, the mirrored rage, the way both men were fighting the same war from different sides. Darius took another step forward, eyes narrowing on Lyra. She bleeds the old flame. The council calls it a curse, but I call it contagion. You've infected him. Lyra's voice was steady. Maybe I reminded him he still has a heart. The soldiers shifted, murmuring. Darius's jaw tightened. Bind her. Kyle moved instantly, blocking their path. Touch her and you die. Brother, Darius said softly, you know how this ends. Don't make me prove it. I'm not your brother, Cale spat. Something flickered in Darius's eyes. Not anger, not sorrow, but something dangerously close to pity. "Then you're no wolf of mine." The soldiers struck. Kyle met them with feral precision, claws flashing, teeth bared. A blur of muscle and fury. The valley erupted into chaos, steel clashing against bone, fire hissing against blood. Lyra's power surged unbidden, flames leaping from her skin in shimmering arcs. Each burst lit the ground beneath her feet, searing shapes into the stone. Symbols ancient and sacred, as if the earth itself remembered her name. But there were too many. For every soldier she burned, 2 more took his place. For every blow Kyle struck, the next one landed harder. And through it all, Darius watched, unmoving, patient. When he finally moved, it was with the grace of death itself, a blur of motion, a flash of silver chain. Lyra screamed as the iron wrapped around her wrists, searing her flesh. She fell to her knees, the fire inside her dimming. Kyle turned, roaring, but Darius struck first. His blade caught Kale across the shoulder, driving him back. Blood sprayed, hot and crimson. "Yield," Darius thundered. "Yield, and I'll spare your pack." Kale spat blood, eyes glowing bright enough to burn. "There is no pack without her." Then the chain jerked, dragging Lyra backward. She hit the ground hard, her vision fracturing. Through the haze, she saw Kale fall beneath a tide of armoured wolves, claws tearing, fangs sinking. And as darkness closed in, she heard Darius's final words before it all went black. "Take her to the pyre." When Lyra woke again, the world was red. Smoke curled above her, thick and choking. The air tasted like ash and fear. Chains held her to a wooden stake, her body bruised and bloodied. The crowd below jeered, faces flickering in the light of the great pyre. High above them, the council stood in a half-circle of stone, their robes rippling like shadows in the firelight. Darius stood beside them, his face unreadable. A voice boomed from the dais. "Lyra of the She-Flame, you stand accused of witchcraft, rebellion, and corruption of an alpha bloodline. By decree of the High Moon Council, you are sentenced to die by flame." Lyra's lips cracked, but her voice still carried. "Then light it. Let's see which burns first, me or your cowardice." The crowd gasped. The council murmured. Darius's eyes flickered briefly, almost imperceptibly. For a moment, something human surfaced, but it was gone as quickly as it came. The executioner stepped forward, torch in hand. The flame danced close, its heat licking her skin. Lyra closed her eyes, waiting for the end. Then, a sound split the air. A howl. Low, long, shattering. The torches flickered. The air shifted. The crowd fell silent. From the forest's edge, shadows moved, fast, deliberate. The guards turned too late. A massive black wolf burst from the tree line, eyes burning gold, body rippling with power. Kyle. He tore through the ranks like a storm unleashed, scattering soldiers like leaves. The pyre's flames whipped higher as he landed before the stake, shifting mid-leap, his human form colliding against the ground with the sound of shattering bone and raw defiance. He rose blood-soaked, breathing hard. His gaze found Lyra's, and in that instant, the world narrowed to the space between them. "Kale," she started, but he silenced her with a look. Behind him, the council roared commands. Arrows flew. Kale didn't flinch. He reached for the chains that bound her. His hands burning as they met the silver, the scent of scorched flesh rising between them. "Stop," she begged. "It'll kill you." "Not before it frees you." The chains snapped. Lyra fell forward into his arms, weak, trembling, but alive. Around them, the council's guards closed in, encircling the pyre. Darius stepped forward, sword drawn, expression grim. "Cale," he said quietly, "don't do this." Cale turned, his body trembling with fury. "You think I came to plead?" Darius's blade lifted. "Then you came to die." Cale's voice was steady, resonant, echoing through the arena. "No, I came to claim." The crowd stilled. Even the council hesitated. Cale's eyes locked on Darius, his tone rising, deep and primal. "By the law of council, if she is my mate, her sin is mine." Gasps rippled through the assembly. The pyre flames bent inward, drawn toward Lyra's pulse. The ground trembled, a low rumble building beneath their feet. Lyra's breath caught, tears burning her eyes. "Cale." He turned to her, voice rough but sure. "They called it sin? I call it bond." Darius lowered his blade an inch, uncertainty flickering across his face. "You would damn yourself?" Cale's answer was a growl that shook the walls. "For her, I already have." The council shouted for restraint, for punishment, for death. But their words drowned beneath the sound of rising wind, a roar that came from the heart of the pyre itself. The fire turned silver, spiraling upward in ribbons of light. Lyra's power responded to his vow, her flame mingling with his blood. The world tilted, stone cracked. The moon itself seemed to flare brighter. And as Darius watched, torn between duty and something breaking deep inside him, the pyre exploded outward in a storm of silver fire, a promise written in light. The old laws had been broken, and a new one, forged in love and ruin, had just begun. The hall of judgment trembled with silence. Smoke from the pyre still hung thick in the air, wrapping the marble pillars in a haze that reeked of burnt ash and fear. The council stood in a circle of gold and shadow, their cloaks heavy with the weight of centuries. Above them, the moon burned red, an omen older than the wolves themselves. And in the centre of that sacred ruin stood Lyra and Cale, bound wrist to wrist, blood still slick between their palms. They had been caught, and yet neither bowed. Cale's chest rose and fell like a storm barely caged. His eyes, wolf-bright, feral with defiance, met those of the elders who sat above them, their faces carved from stone. The chains that wrapped around him glowed faintly, suppressing his shift. His wolf fought beneath his skin, snarling against the iron law that kept him still. But what the council didn't understand was that Cale's restraint wasn't weakness. It was devotion, because his true rebellion wasn't in breaking the chains. It was in refusing to let go of her. Lyra stood beside him, her wrists raw, her breath trembling. The mark of the she-flame still glimmered faintly beneath her collarbone, pulsing like a heartbeat. Every time her pulse quickened, the flame inside her answered, alive, furious, whispering in tongues only she could hear. She had thought herself brave, but under the scrutiny of the Empire's eyes, even courage had teeth. The High Elder stepped forward, his voice cutting through the still air. By decree of the Council and the ancient law of flesh and fire, the traitors shall be bound by the bond of blood. The crowd gasped, some out of awe, others in horror. For everyone knew the bond of blood was not a ceremony, it was a sentence, a ritual older than crowns, older than the wars between clans. Once invoked, it could not be undone. The pair's hearts would beat as one. Every lie between them would call fire into the bonded's veins. Every betrayal would draw blood from the other's chest. It was love turned to weaponry. It was union turned to punishment. Kale lifted his head. You would curse what you cannot control. The elder's gaze did not waver. You would defile what was never yours to claim. Lyra's throat tightened. She could feel the pulse of Kale's hand through the binding rope. Even that small connection was electric, like holding lightning in her palm. She wanted to pull away, to hide from the dozens of eyes watching her like vultures, yet she couldn't. Every part of her was drawn to him, even when fear made her knees weak. The elder raised his staff. Prepare the flame. 2 guards stepped forward, each carrying bowls filled with molten gold. The heat shimmered in the air, and when the first drop hit the stone floor, it hissed like venom. Lyra's breath caught. The scent was unbearable, sweet, metallic, ancient. Kyle turned slightly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. Look at me, not them. She hesitated. Kyle. Look at me, he repeated, his tone fierce, steady. If you break, they win. Her gaze met his, and in that gaze, the world fell away. The crowd, the chains, the fear, it all dissolved. There was only him, the man who had defied his bloodline, who had turned his back on the council's crown to save her. His eyes were dark rivers of sorrow and fire, carrying everything he couldn't say aloud. The ritual began. A priest in crimson robes stepped forward, chanting in a language that scraped against the edges of time. His voice was sharp, heavy with invocation. Gold light began to crawl up the rope that bound their wrists together, winding like veins of molten sun. Lyra gasped as the heat seared her skin. Kyle didn't flinch. He just squeezed her hand harder. You are bound by blood, the priest intoned. By the law of flesh and fire, your hearts are one. Speak truth and live. Speak falsehood and burn. The crowd echoed the final word. Burn, like a spell. The gold reached their veins. Lyra felt it move through her like a river of fire, filling every hollow space, every hidden wound. It wasn't just pain. It was revelation. She saw flashes behind her eyes, the first wolves, their bodies burning beneath twin moons, the flame mother, crowned in sorrow. Kyle's face bathed in gold light, his jaw clenched against agony. Then, silence. The glow dimmed. The rope between them fell away, turning to dust. The mark that remained on their joined wrists pulsed faintly, glowing like an ember that refused to die. The ritual was complete. The High Elder lowered his staff. It is done. The bond is sealed. The curse lives. Kale's breathing was ragged. Lyra's hands trembled. The crowd erupted into a roar that was half celebration, half condemnation. Some chanted their names as if they were gods reborn. Others spat as if they were monsters. But in that chaos, Kale leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. They think they've chained us. They've only made us stronger. The way he said it, soft, certain, dangerous, sent a tremor through her chest. She wanted to believe him, but deep inside, she could still feel the curse stirring like a serpent, waiting for the first lie to wake it. Night fell heavy over the empire. They were taken to a chamber below the hall, stone walls lit by 1,000 flickering torches. Guards stood watch at every corner. Kale was bleeding from his shoulder, where the golden seal had burned through skin to bone. Lyra reached for him, but he caught her wrist. Don't, he warned. Your flame is too raw. It'll hurt you. She pulled free anyway. You think I care? Her palms glowed faintly as she pressed them to his wound. Heat bloomed between them, not the violent burn of fire, but something gentler, like dawn breaking through ash. Kale's breath hitched. His body shuddered beneath her touch. When she lifted her hands, The wound had closed, leaving only a faint scar. Cale looked at her, half awe, half fear. "You'll die if they find out you used it again." "Then they'll have to kill me twice," she whispered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive, the kind of silence that holds everything words can't carry. Above them, the council's chants echoed faintly through stone. Plans, decrees, new laws written in their blood. The Empire would not forgive rebellion, no matter how noble the reason. Lyra sat against the wall, her body trembling from the aftershock of magic. Kyle paced the small cell, his wolf restless beneath the surface. Every time his eyes met hers, something flickered, something that was both dangerous and tender. Finally, he stopped. "You shouldn't have done it." She looked up, exhausted. "You would have bled out." "I would have survived." "You don't know that." His voice softened. "I do, because I have something to live for." Her breath caught. The air between them thickened, dense with things unsaid. She wanted to tell him that she felt it too, that the bond, the flame, the curse, it all terrified her. But she'd still choose him 1,000 times over. Instead, she said nothing, because the moment she did, the curse would listen, and it would know. They slept little that night. Dreams came in fragments. Lyra saw a throne made of bone, a queen crowned in fire, Cale standing at her side with a sword of light. The prophecy whispered again, the same words that had haunted her since childhood. The one who mates under the full eclipse will shatter the blood oath. She woke with a gasp, her body slick with sweat. Cale was already awake, his gaze fixed on the moonlight slipping through the bars. "Dreams again?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "What did you see?" "The end," she whispered, "and the beginning." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Then we'll face both." When dawn came, the guards opened the cell. The council awaited them again, but this time the air in the great hall was different. The elders' faces were calm, too calm. Plans had already been made. The ceremony was not just punishment anymore. It was politics. The Empire needed a new symbol, something to unite the wolves beneath fear disguised as faith. And Lyra and Cale, unwillingly, had become that symbol. The High Elder smiled, thin and cold. "The bond of blood stands. The realm will witness peace through sacrifice." Cale's jaw tightened. Peace born of chains isn't peace. Lyra's flame flared briefly beneath her skin, responding to his rage. The elder noticed but said nothing. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He wanted the curse to bloom. He wanted her to burn. As they were led out, the crowd reached for them again, some to bless, some to curse. Lyra's gaze swept over the faces, the mothers holding children close, the soldiers clutching their weapons, the eyes that burned with hope or hate. And for the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about her, or Cale. It was about an empire built on fear of its own fire. That night, as the empire celebrated their forced union with feasts and hymns, Cale and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the valley. The moon hung full and pale, touching the land in silver. The mark on their wrists glowed faintly between them. Kyle reached out, tracing the line of her arm with his thumb. "You feel it too, don't you?" She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded. "The curse?" she whispered. "No," he said. "The bond." For a heartbeat, there was no empire, no decree, no curse, just the pulse between them, slow and steady, calling to something older than law. But deep in Lyra's chest, the flame stirred again, hungry, listening. waiting for the first lie. And far below the marble halls, the war it would one day ignite had already begun to breathe. The rebellion didn't begin with a war cry, it began with a whisper. A name spoken in the dark. Lyra, a name that the council had tried to bury under fire and law. But whispers, like embers, find their way into cracks the Empire can't seal. For moons they'd been running, hunted across the broken provinces, moving through ruins and hollow mountains. The packs that once bowed to the council's law now gathered in silence, drawn by rumour, by the impossible hope that a she-wolf who should have burned was still alive. She stood now in the shadows of a forgotten temple, its columns cracked, its roof open to the bruised sky. The scent of old blood and moss hung heavy. Cale was beside her, his arm still bandaged from the chains he'd torn through during the binding. The mark that joined them, that burning golden scar, pulsed faintly between them, a reminder of both promise and curse. Lyra touched the stone altar before her. "This is where they crowned the first Flame Queen," she murmured. Her voice trembled like someone touching memory. "They killed her here too." Cale's hand tightened around his spear. "Then this is where we begin again." They weren't alone. From the shadows, wolves emerged, scarred, gaunt, their eyes flickering between human and beast. Slaves freed from pits, seers with silver-threaded hair, hunters who'd abandoned the council's pay. Their loyalty wasn't to law anymore, it was to survival, to her. Lyra faced them. The storm wind caught her hair, turning it into a burning halo in the torchlight. "The council calls us traitors," she said. "But look around you. Who betrayed whom first? They turned packs into property. They sold our kind on stages and called it justice. Tonight, we end their market." A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear and faith colliding. Kyle watched her, his jaw set, his heart caught between pride and dread. The curse between them thrummed with her every word. If she lied, if she promised more than she could give, it would burn her from the inside out. But she didn't flinch. When dawn broke, they moved. The old slave market stood at the heart of the capital, where centuries of wolves had been branded, broken, sold. The banners of the council still flapped above the square, arrogant and red. The city slept under curfew, but shadows moved through the alleys, rebels slipping through cracks, guided by the pulse of the mark that glowed faintly over Lyra's heart. She moved like smoke. The rain cloaked her, the scent of iron and ash masking her trail. At her back, Cale's pack crept through the corridors. Every heartbeat counted. The closer they came, the louder the memories roared, the jeers, the chains, the taste of mud and humiliation. At the edge of the square, Lyra stopped. The cages were still there, stacked like monuments to cruelty. Wolves huddled inside, bones sharp beneath torn skin. A guard leaned against a post, bored, his torch flickering low. Lyra's whisper cut the dark. "Now." The first flame leapt from her palm. It wasn't the wildfire that once devoured her path. It was clean, controlled, precise. The torch's light bent toward her like it recognized its master. Fire slid across the chains, melting iron to liquid. The cages groaned. One by one, the prisoners looked up, eyes widening. Freedom, in its first breath, sounded like disbelief. Kyle struck the first guard before he could shout. Steel met flesh, quick and silent. Then chaos erupted. Wolves shifted midair, fur bursting through skin, claws flashing. The square became a storm of teeth and flame. Lyra moved through it all, untouchable and burning. Her eyes glowed gold as she reached cage after cage, her hands trembling with power. Every time she touched a lock, it screamed and gave way. But each use of the flame tore something inside her, the bond's curse feeding on her defiance. Cale saw her stagger. "Lyra!" "I'm fine," she gasped, even as blood traced her lips. He caught her wrist. The bond between them pulsed hot, searing his palm. "You lie, and it burns you." She tore free. "Then let it burn." "I'd rather die freeing them than live chained again." Her words ripped through the night, and for a heartbeat, everything stopped. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Then the slaves, the broken wolves, the forgotten souls. They rose. The market square exploded into revolution. Guards fell, chains shattered, the old banners burned. The scent of smoke and fur filled the air, thick and holy. Lyra lifted her face to the sky, where lightning crawled across the clouds. "For every wolf they sold," she cried, "for every name they erased." Cale fought beside her, a blur of muscle and fury. But through the blood and chaos, his gaze never left her. She was the storm's center, fragile and endless. When the last gate fell, silence descended. Smoke coiled up toward the towers, where the council's symbols melted in the heat. The freed wolves knelt. One by one they bowed their heads to her, not out of fear, out of awe. "Flame Mother," someone whispered. The words spread like wildfire. "Flame Mother, Flame Mother." Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to say she was just a runaway, a slave who refused to die quietly. But deep inside, something ancient stirred. A memory not her own. A woman bound to a pyre, eyes open as fire kissed her skin, whispering to the moon. "One day, my daughter will burn for love, not punishment." Lyra's knees weakened. Kyle was there before she fell. His arms wrapped around her, steady and warm despite the cold air. "You did it," he murmured. Her eyes lifted to his. "No, we did." The bond glowed faintly between them, softer this time. Not punishment, recognition. But victory carried a price. From the city walls came the clang of horns, the council's alarm. Torches flared across the battlements. The night filled with the sound of marching boots. Kyle cursed under his breath. "They're coming." Lyra turned to the freed wolves. "Scatter. Find the old tunnels. Go east until you see the red cliffs. There's sanctuary there." "What about you?" a young wolf cried. She looked at the horizon where the palace lights burned. "We go back to where this began." Cale's eyes darkened. "The council chamber?" She nodded. "They'll call this treason. Let them. I'm done running from their judgment." They slipped into the labyrinth of alleys as dawn broke over the city. Behind them, the market smouldered, a pyre for an empire's sins. For the first time since her escape, Lyra didn't feel hunted. She felt awake. And as they disappeared into the rising light, the whisper followed. "Flame Mother. Flame Mother." What had started as a rebellion had already become legend. The night was heavy with prophecy, the kind that tasted like ash on the tongue. Lyra stood at the edge of the moon court's marble sanctuary, the air humming with deception disguised as prayer. Every white-robed seer who bowed before her had eyes too calm, too knowing. The scent of wolf's bane clung faintly to the incense smoke. Faint, but deliberate. The court's betrayal was not sudden. It was a storm that had been gathering behind smiles. Cale stood beside her, his posture proud, but eyes strained. His claws flexed under the pressure of silence. The high seer of the moon court, cloaked in shimmering lunar silk, stepped forward. Her voice slithered through the hall. The Flame Mother cannot rise beside the Wolf King who betrayed her. The words cracked through the air like lightning striking stone. Lyra's heart stuttered. The torches dimmed as if recoiling from the truth. Kale froze. She turned to him, searching his face for denial, for fury, for anything. But his silence was louder than any confession. What do they mean? Her voice trembled, low and sharp. Kale's jaw clenched. The gold flecks in his eyes dimmed into the colour of storm clouds. They twist truth into poison, he said. The High Seer's smile was thin and merciless. Did he not pledge your name to the council for his throne? Did he not swear to keep you captive if it meant his pack's survival? The chamber stirred. Wolves shifted. Whispers curdled into doubt. The rebellion's leaders, the freed wolves, the seers who had followed her, stared in disbelief. Lyra's hands shook. The heat beneath her skin, once a source of life, now felt like betrayal igniting her veins. "Tell me she lies," Lyra whispered. Kale stepped closer, his hand reaching for her, but the bond between them recoiled. The invisible tether that once sang between their souls hissed with pain. "I bargained," he said, voice raw, "but not for power, for time, to keep you alive." The room exploded in murmurs. Lyra stepped back as if struck. "You sold my freedom." Her voice cracked, brittle as glass. "You made me your throne's price." He reached for her again, but she was already gone. The flame beneath her skin erupted, scorching the marble, splitting the sigils carved into the walls. The moon court gasped as the air thickened with heat and fury. Lyra's tears turned to steam before they could fall. "Lyra!" "Don't," she said, her voice hollow, the sound of something breaking inside her. "Every promise burns when it touches your name." The fire roared through the sanctuary, consuming the banners, curling along the walls like living rage. Seers screamed. Wolves fell to their knees. Kyle didn't move. He let the flames lick his armor, let the pain bury into his skin. He deserved it. Lyra fled into the night, her power tearing the clouds apart. The forest awaited her, dark, cursed, ancient. Trees whispered her name as if mourning her already. The air there was different, heavier, tasting of decay and forgotten gods. She ran until her legs failed her, collapsing beside a pool of black water. The moon reflected her face, ash-streaked, eyes glowing like dying embers. Her reflection moved even when she didn't. From the shadows, voices rose, soft, layered, almost kind. The old gods. "Child of flame," they murmured. "The Wolf King's heart is your ruin. You were born to end, not to heal." Lyra gritted her teeth. No. The wind shifted, cold and deliberate. The voices grew louder, overlapping in harmony and threat. "You carry the seed of the first fire, the one that cleansed the world before light returned. You are not salvation, little flame. You are its echo." Her pulse thundered. The fire in her chest twisted, pulsing with every word they spoke. "You lie," she said, voice breaking. "The gods died when we rose." "We do not die," they whispered through the trees. "We sleep, and we wake when our fire does." The water rippled. A figure stepped from the pool, not flesh, not spirit, but both. A woman draped in smoke, her eyes twin moons. "He betrayed you because he fears you. Even now he hunts you not to protect you, but to cage the fire that can unmake him." Lyra backed away, heart racing. The forest seemed to breathe with her fear. "Stop," she pleaded. "Stop." The woman tilted her head. You feel it, don't you? The burn that grows stronger when you doubt him. That's not a curse. It's awakening. Lyra fell to her knees. The ground burned beneath her palms. Her heart was a furnace. The bond that tied her to Kyle throbbed with pain, a wound that refused to heal. Far away, Kyle roared under the moon, feeling her pain through the mark. His brother found him amidst the ruins of the Moon Court. Darius's voice was grim. She knows. Kyle's eyes glowed gold, grief carved deep into his face. Then she's in danger. She's a danger, Darius corrected. The gods are whispering again. The flame inside her grows. It will consume everything, even you. Kale turned toward the forest, the scent of her still fresh in the air. Then I burn with her. The forest felt him before she did. Wolves scattered as his aura surged, dominance mixed with despair. The cursed woods shifted, vines curling toward his steps as if warning him back. Lyra sat at the heart of the glade, surrounded by fire that refused to fade. The gods' voices lingered like ghosts, promising power, destruction, freedom. Her eyes glowed brighter than the moonlight. When Kale stepped into the clearing, the air crackled. His voice broke through the noise. Lyra. She didn't look up. The gods say I was never meant to save this world. That I'm its ending. He approached slowly. They feed on despair. Don't let them rewrite you. Rewrite me? She rose, fire trailing down her arms. You did that the moment you traded me for your crown. Kale's voice was a rasp of pain. I did it to keep the council from killing you, to buy a chance to break their chains. Every lie I told was to save your life. Her laughter was sharp, filled with tears. And what life is that? One bound by deceit? One where my fire burns everyone I touch? He reached her, close enough that the heat blistered his skin. Then let it burn me. Let me earn what I destroyed. The bond between them flared, a violent surge of light that split the night open. Fire and shadow collided, and for a moment, the entire forest glowed red. The gods hissed, recoiling from the union they could not break. Lyra's flames trembled, her eyes flickering with pain. Why can't I hate you? She whispered. Kale cupped her face, ignoring the sear of her skin. Because you were never meant to. We were born on the same breath, bound by the same curse. The gods screamed from the dark, voices turning to thunder. Then you shall fall together. The fire erupted skyward, devouring the treetops, and every star above them vanished into smoke. When it ended, the forest was silent. Ash and moonlight. Kale held her close, her pulse faint but alive. The gods' whispers faded into the roots, vowing return. Lyra's last words before sleep took her were quiet, almost tender. If I end this world, Kale, promise me you'll build the next. He kissed her brow, the bond burning anew, not with punishment, but with purpose. Together. And somewhere, deep beneath the scorched earth, the old gods stirred again, whispering not of doom, but of war. Silence swallowed the forest after the betrayal. Not even the wind dared move through the dead trees. The world felt suspended, caught between heartbeat and ash. Lyra stood alone in the clearing where light no longer reached, the air thick with the scent of rot and forgotten magic. The moon above hung bruised and swollen, its reflection scattered across pools of black water. Her body ached with exhaustion, but it was her heart that bore the heaviest wound. Kyle's face haunted every flicker of her thoughts, the eyes that once promised eternity, now ghosts of something that might never have been real. She walked until her legs trembled beneath her. The cursed forest was said to devour souls, yet it welcomed her. Shadows bent toward her flame as if recognizing one of their own. Every step echoed like a whisper of judgment. She felt the weight of her lineage pressing against her spine, the blood of she-wolves who had risen, burned, and been forgotten. Tonight, their memories stirred. When she reached the stone circle buried in roots, the ground opened in a sigh. Pale mist coiled upward, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down into darkness. She didn't resist. Her body surrendered to the pull, her spirit slipping between worlds. And then, silence became voices. 1,000 murmurs rose like wind through bones. They came as light, as shadow, as echoes of herself. The first appeared before her, cloaked in flame that did not burn. Her eyes held galaxies of pain. "We were the ones who dared," the spirit said, her voice layered with centuries. "Now you must answer what we could not. Will you be consumed, or will you become the fire?" Lyra could not speak. The ground beneath her feet turned molten, and she fell to her knees as memories not her own flooded her mind. Queens executed beneath eclipsed moons, lovers bound to stakes for vows spoken too boldly, wolves who knelt and wolves who burned. She saw their faces, each carrying the same defiance that now lived in her chest. Her throat closed with grief. The forest twisted around her vision, flickering between past and present. She was forced to live their final moments, the betrayal, the agony, the sacrifice. It was a test, one she could neither refuse nor escape. Her skin blistered with invisible fire, searing deeper than flesh. But beneath the pain, she felt the pulse of something older than fear, a rhythm that whispered her name. She remembered the night Cale found her, bleeding in the rain, how he had looked at her as though she were the storm itself. She remembered the warmth of his breath, the promise in his silence. That memory struck through the torment like a blade of light. The spirits watched her endure. Then, another figure stepped forward, taller, crowned with white flame. "You carry his mark," she said, "the Alpha's bond. You cannot ascend while tethered to love that betrays its vow." Lyra's heart twisted. She wanted to scream that she didn't choose this bond, that she didn't choose the prophecy or the curse. But the spirit's gaze burned through her excuses. Love was never given freely. It demanded surrender. And surrender was the one thing Lyra feared most. The spirit lifted her hand, and the world caught fire. Every branch, every stone, every thought around Lyra ignited in gold. The flames curled inward, devouring the air until all that remained was her heartbeat. Then came the final vision. She stood before a mirror of obsidian. In its reflection, she saw two versions of herself, the one who ran and the one who stayed. The voice of the first she-wolf whispered, "Only one can survive the dawn. Choose." Her reflection's eyes glowed with the same forbidden flame that once brought kingdoms to ruin. She could feel the forest watching, waiting for her decision. If she renounced her love, she would become pure fire, a weapon of the gods. If she held on, she would remain human enough to burn. Lyra stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached toward the glass. The surface rippled like water, and the heat surged around her. She closed her eyes. "I will not die as they did," she whispered, though no one remained to hear. "I will live, even if it kills me." The mirror shattered. A scream tore from her throat, half agony, half rebirth. The fire consumed her, but instead of turning to ash, her skin turned luminous white. The flames bowed, folding into her veins until she glowed from within. The air trembled as her heartbeat became thunder. When her eyes opened again, they reflected not the moonlight, but the fire of creation itself. Far away, in the marble hall of the Alpha Council, Kale knelt beneath the weight of their decree. His armor was torn, his body broken, but his voice carried strength that silenced even the elders. "Take my life for hers," he said. "Let her flame burn free, even if it scorches the realm." The council's judgment was swift. They chained him before the obsidian dais, the symbol of law and death intertwined. Darius stood behind them, his brother's shadow carved in anguish. "You would destroy us for her," one elder hissed. Kale's answer was simple. "She is not destruction. She is what your fear has always denied you: freedom." His words rippled through the hall, unsettling those who had never questioned their oaths. And then, without warning, the great torches extinguished. The hall fell into darkness. A single tremor rolled through the earth. Every wolf felt it, the pull of a rising power, ancient and untamed. Lyra had awakened. She stepped from the forest's edge, her form wrapped in fire that did not harm the living. The ground bloomed in her wake. Dead roots burst into flame, then into life again. The white flame licked the night air like a living creature. The moon above turned red, its light cascading over her shoulders like bloodied silk. Her voice cut through the night, soft yet boundless. "I have faced your gods. I have walked through their judgment, and I have returned." Every creature, from the lowest slave to the highest alpha, felt the pull of her words. The forest bowed. The air itself seemed to kneel. She crossed into the council's courtyard, the great gates of iron melting before her. The guards fell to their knees as she passed, not out of duty, but awe. When she entered the chamber, Kale lifted his head, his eyes widening as if seeing something divine. She walked toward him, the light bending around her. The chains that bound him glowed red, then dissolved. For a moment, the world stood still, the two of them facing one another, history written in the silence between their breaths. The High Elder rose, trembling. "What are you?" Lyra turned, her flame flickering with sorrow and clarity. "I am the decree," she said, her voice echoing across the walls. "I am the law reborn." And with that, the fire that once sought to consume her now obeyed. It surged upward, breaking through the marble ceiling, piercing the red moon above. The sky split open, raining silver ash over the empire. Every wolf felt the bond within them shift, the chains of obedience snapping one by one. Kale fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the force of it. He saw in her what he had always feared, not the end, but the beginning. Lyra reached for him, her hand brushing against his cheek. The warmth that passed between them was not gentle. It was the raw pulse of destiny. The council tried to rise against her, but their power faltered. Flames devoured their decrees, their banners, their law. And as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, Lyra stood at the center of it all, a being no longer bound by flesh or fear, yet still haunted by love. Her transformation was complete, but her heart remained fragile. She turned to Kale, her eyes glistening. The prophecy whispered in her veins. The one who mates under the full eclipse will shatter the blood oath. The eclipse faded, leaving them both trembling under a new dawn. The war was not over. It had just begun. For Lyra's flame no longer belonged to the gods or the council. It belonged to her. And with every breath she took, the world would have to decide whether to worship her or burn. The world had changed colour. The dawn that rose after Lyra's declaration was not gold or blue, but crimson, stained with smoke, soaked in the remnants of what once was. The empire burned from its heart outward, a slow collapse of stone and law. Towers that had stood for centuries bowed under the weight of her fire, and the cries of wolves echoed through every mountain pass. The old order was dying. Lyra stood upon the balcony of the shattered council hall, the wind tugging at her hair like restless ghosts. Below, the city blazed in 1,000 small suns, every flame a story of rebellion. She could smell iron in the air, the sharp taste of battle, of endings. Her body pulsed with the goddess's fire. It was no longer something she summoned. It lived in her, breathed through her, demanded from her. Each heartbeat made the world shudder. Yet in that power, she felt an emptiness that no victory could fill. Kael's presence beside her steadied the chaos, but his silence carried the weight of unspoken truths. He looked older now. The war had carved lines into his face, not of age, but of sorrow. His eyes, once fierce with command, softened when they found her. Between them lay the kind of stillness that follows a storm. Fragile, trembling, too heavy to last. The council's banners had turned to ash, their laws erased, yet their ghosts remained. They gathered in the smoke, whispering accusations that clawed at her resolve. The goddess within her stirred, her voice layered and eternal. They must answer before me. And so the judgment began. From the ashes of the hall, 12 pillars of fire rose, each forming the shape of a council elder. Their bodies were made of memory and regret, their faces contorted by fear. The goddess, wearing Lyra's form, stepped into the circle. Her light dimmed everything else. The spirits trembled before her. One by one they tried to speak, to justify, to twist truth into survival. But the fire consumed their words before they could rise. Justice had no language now, only consequence. Lyra's heart fractured with each cry, but she did not waver. This was not vengeance. It was reckoning. Kael watched from the edge of the dais, his hand pressed against his side where blood seeped through torn armor. He said nothing. He understood that this was her burden alone. When the final elder dissolved into ash, silence fell. The goddess's voice faded from Lyra's throat, leaving behind a hollow ache. The flames receded, revealing the city beneath, wounded but breathing. And then came the tremor. It began in the earth, deep and slow, a heartbeat beneath the ruins. The eclipse above had not ended. It hovered, frozen in the sky. From its dark center, a beam of light split through the clouds. Cutting across the battlefield, where wolves and men clashed in the last desperate struggle. Kael turned toward it, his instincts flaring. "They're still fighting," he whispered, though no one could hear. Lyra's pulse quickened. She could feel the tide of power shifting, drawn toward the light. She descended the crumbling steps, her feet leaving trails of ember. The wind roared through the broken city as if urging her forward. At the base of the hill, the armies were still locked in chaos. Wolves of the lower packs fought against soldiers still loyal to the fallen council. The ground was slick with rain and blood, and above them, the eclipse burned like a watchful eye. Lyra stepped into the fray. Every movement stilled, blades lowered, growls faltered. Even the storm paused. Her fire unfurled like wings, casting gold across the battlefield. "Enough," her voice carried, echoing in the hearts of every living soul. But fate had already chosen its sacrifice. From behind her, Kael stumbled forward, his body faltering under unseen weight. A silver blade, poisoned, crafted from moonstone, protruded from his back. He fell to one knee, his breath leaving him in a ragged exhale. Lyra turned just as he collapsed. The world narrowed to that single moment, the sight of his blood staining the soil, black against her light, the sound of his heartbeat fading into silence, the smell of metal and loss. She ran to him, her flame dimming with every step. Her hands shook as she cradled his face, her voice breaking. But there were no words left, only the echo of every promise they'd ever made. Kael's eyes met hers, and in them she saw no fear, only peace. He lifted his trembling hand, pressing it against her chest, where her flame burned brightest. "If my blood must end the old world," he whispered, "then let yours begin the new." The goddess within her stirred once more, but this time it was not power that rose, but love. Their bond, forged through defiance and pain, reached beyond flesh. As his life ebbed, his blood touched hers, and the flame within her heart blazed white. The fire didn't consume, it transformed. The light spread outward, sweeping across the battlefield. Wolves dropped their weapons. The storm broke apart. Every soul, enemy and ally alike, felt the pulse of something sacred washing through them. The bond between alpha and mate had rewritten itself, no longer of dominance and submission, but of shared breath, shared choice. Kael's body grew still in her arms, yet his essence remained. His spirit merged with hers, the fire embracing his blood as its equal. The mark upon her skin shifted, forming a second circle entwined with the first, a symbol of unity, of rebirth. The eclipse shuddered. The beam of light descended fully now, striking the ground with a force that split the horizon. The goddess herself manifested from it, vast and radiant, her form woven from the fire of worlds. She gazed upon Lyra with both sorrow and pride. "You have done what none before you dared," she said, her voice the song of stars collapsing. "You have turned love into law." Lyra's strength waned. Her body trembled under the goddess's gaze, her tears evaporating before they could fall. "He is gone," she whispered. "Nothing born of flame ever truly dies," the goddess answered. With a single gesture, the fire enveloped them both. The sky ignited, the eclipse breaking apart into streams of silver. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The war was over. Where the council once stood, only a throne of ash and moonlight remained. Lyra ascended its steps slowly, each movement heavy with the weight of what she had lost. When she sat, the realm itself exhaled. Mountains stilled, rivers calmed, the wolves bowed. Her crown was not forged of metal but of fire, living, breathing flame that flickered with every beat of her heart. She spoke softly, her voice carrying farther than thunder. "Freedom," she said, "is born in flame." The words became law. Across the realm, the chains of old oaths shattered. The packs were no longer bound by bloodlines, but by choice. A new era began, not of dominance, but balance. And yet, even in peace, the ache of loss remained. When night fell, Lyra stood upon the balcony once more, the ruins glowing beneath the stars. The world was hers to rebuild, but her heart still searched for the echo of his. The wind carried whispers of Kael's name through the trees, and she closed her eyes, letting the sound become her lullaby. Then came the cry. Soft at first, almost mistaken for the wind. But it grew, an infant's wail rising from the ashes below. Lyra descended the marble steps, following the sound through smoke and silence until she reached the ruins of the old amphitheatre. There, Beneath the shattered altar where her fire first took form lay a child, wrapped in tattered cloth, untouched by flame. On its chest glowed a mark identical to hers, the twin circles intertwined. Lyra froze. The fire inside her flickered uncertainly. She reached for the child, her fingers trembling. As she lifted it, warmth spread through her palms. The mark pulsed once, as if alive. Her voice broke the silence, a whisper carried by the wind. Was the curse ever broken? Or just passed on? The question lingered, unanswered, carried into the dawn as the first light touched the horizon. The goddess's voice, distant and timeless, seemed to murmur through the flames. Every ending births another fire. Lyra looked down at the child, whose eyes opened, bright, golden, knowing. In their depths, she saw Kale's reflection and the faint curve of a smile. The Empire slept beneath the glow of a new sun, unaware that its next prophecy had already drawn its first breath. And so the world turned, rebuilt from ruin and flame, balanced on the edge of love and law. For in every heart that dares to burn, a new story begins. If this story burned through your soul, her voice lingered like a promise in the fading light. Subscribe to Sophie's romance collections. Here, love defies law, and every heart carries a flame.